COP27, the United Nations Climate Change Conference. Here's Dave Malkoff in Egypt.
We're at COP27 with Professor Katharine Hayhoe, who is a climate scientist and perpetually the most positive person talking about this subject. How do you keep the smile on your face all the time?
Well, first of all, sometimes it's so bad you just have to laugh.
Yes, okay.
That is absolutely key. But the second thing I've discovered is if you look for good news, you can find it. Now, I'm a scientist.
Where are you finding that here?
I am finding it in the fact that all of these faces that you're seeing here, they're here to change the world. It is not just about countries, it's about companies, organizations, tribal nations, schools, universities, students, senior citizens, grandparents. The entire world is here, thousands of people, and they're all here for climate action. And we also know that they're not just here to talk about it, they're here because they're already doing it, and they want to scale it up.
Is there time left to do something? That's what it all comes down to sometimes when you're talking about this subject and you're thinking, do we have enough time to do anything to keep from getting to 1.5 degrees of warming or above?
Well, what the science says is this: every bit of warming matters. It doesn't mean that if we get to 1.49, everything's fine, and if we go to 1.51, we're all going to hell in a handbasket.
Yeah.
We know that just like there's no magic number of cigarettes you can smoke before you get lung damage, there's no magic amount of carbon you can produce before you start to see impacts.
That's a good way of putting it.
But we also know, in those terms, that we might have lung damage, but we don't have emphysema, we don't have lung cancer, and we're not dead yet. So when's the best time to act? Now. How much? As soon as possible.
Yeah, and we were talking to the same climate activists that we were talking to, Svetlana, who was talking about how they need to just get everybody off of oil. Is that realistic? Is that possible? Can that happen?
It can.
Yeah.
And
really?
We can do two things.
Yeah.
First of all, in the United States, for example, through efficiency alone, we could cut carbon emissions in half, just through efficiency.
Yeah.
And then the second half is we have to transition to clean sources of energy, and some ways are easier than others. So electricity, a lot easier to transition electricity. In fact, I live in Texas, where we already get over a third of our electricity from wind, in Texas. The higher hanging fruit is how do you decarbonize shipping? How do you decarbonize flying? How do you decarbonize agriculture?
There's no motors that can run a giant cross-ocean ship. There's no motors that can run a cross-ocean plane.
Well, there are motors that can run, but there aren't batteries that are light enough to go in the airplane.
Oh, yes, that's right. You need the batteries.
People here are working on that.
Yeah.
We've got people working on how to decarbonize shipping, how to decarbonize travel. And what I do with my organization, the Nature Conservancy, we talk about how to work with nature, because nature could take up to 37% of the carbon emissions we produce every year.
You're talking about trees and the ocean?
Yeah, not just trees. Grasslands, coastal wetlands, peatlands, and even agricultural soils can take up carbon where it's a fertilizer. We want it.
And there's little things that you can do just by scrubbing the outside of ships.
Oh, yeah.
And making them more efficient, that you can cut down on diesel fuel.
They've created a robot. I mean, who knew that a robot was a climate solution?
Yeah.
That can clean off the bottom of a ship, and instead of divers taking weeks to do it, the robot does it in hours, and it cuts 20% of the fuel use off the ship.
Amazing.
And it's cheaper.
20%?
Yeah.
Just by cleaning a ship, that's the efficiency that you're talking about.
Exactly.
Yeah.
The whole thing of like, waste not, want not, turn off the lights when you're out of the room, a stitch in time saves 9, it's true.
Tell me about what you're hearing about methane here at COP.
So I study methane, and what it is a very powerful heat-trapping gas. It is over 30 times stronger than carbon dioxide. But here's the good thing, methane is also an energy source, and when you burn it, it produces CO2, but we have to be getting rid of those methane emissions.
Yeah.
And a lot of those methane emissions are coming from leaking oil and gas wells. So people are finally realizing, thanks to satellite observations, that there's all this methane leaking out of these old wells, and we have to stop it.
And you can see that with a certain type of camera if you look at these wells.
You can.
Yeah. So when I tell people about what I do as the environmental correspondent here at the Weather Channel, they ask me, what do you do about people who don't believe in climate change? And then I wonder about that word believe. And what does that mean? Like to me, belief sounds like something that's more religious.
I think you just hit the nail on the head there. When someone asks me, do you believe in climate change? I say no. I don't believe in it because it's not a religion.
And you are very religious yourself.
I am.
Yes.
I'm a Christian.
Yeah.
When we look at the data, and the data is clear, it's real, it's us, it's serious, but there are solutions if we act now.
Yeah. So what? Go more into that. Tell me about what the difference is between something that is scientifically proven and something that is a belief. I mean, you could talk about, the universe in this way. You could talk about many different things, life itself.
You could say, I don't believe that gravity is real, but if you step off the cliff, you're going down. It doesn't matter what you believe.
It doesn't matter who you voted for. It doesn't matter where you live, yeah.
A hurricane doesn't knock on your door and say, excuse me, are you a registered Republican or Democrat before it destroys your house?
Yeah.
And so with climate change, the only reason it's become politicized is because some people don't want to fix it. And so instead of saying it's real and it's affecting the poorest people in the world and I don't want to fix it, instead they try to say it's not real, it's not a big deal. Because most of us at our core, we don't want to be a bad person.
Yeah.
But the reality is when it comes to a changing climate, it is real, it is serious, and every single one of us is already being affected by it, whether we acknowledge it or not.
Are you working with faith-based organizations here in Africa?
I am. In fact, today I'm getting together with the Christian Climate Observers Network.
Yeah.
And people in the US might be surprised to hear that Christians care about climate change, but outside the US, and even a large number of Christians inside the US, care very deeply about climate change. Because if we believe that we've been given responsibility over every living thing on the planet, which it says in Genesis at the beginning of the Bible, and if we also believe that we are told to be recognized by our love for others, how loving is it if we just close our eyes and plug our ears to the suffering and to the cries of our global neighbor who are already being impacted by climate change?
When you see something here like a booth about the UAE and them decarbonizing, what do you think when you see something like that?
It's challenging for countries who depend primarily on fossil fuels for their income. And the UAE has the largest number of fossil fuel lobbyists in their delegation, of any delegation.
But they're here saying that there's some kind of green
Well, they're here because they're being affected by climate change too. Whether they like it or not, all of our futures depend on fixing this problem.
And so how much time do we have left to do this? Did we have to do something 20 years ago?
We'd be better off if we did.
Yeah.
It's like that smoking analogy. If you could have stopped smoking 20 years ago, you'd be a lot better off than you are today. But you're still alive, you're still kicking, and so the best time to cut your carbon is as much as possible, as soon as possible.
This carbon dioxide kind of sits in the atmosphere for thousands of years. There's no vacuum that you could take and suck it off of the top of the atmosphere, right?
Well, there's a vacuum that you can take to suck it out the bottom.
Yes,
and it's called photosynthesis.
Oh,
yes.
Yes.
It's amazing through conserving and stewarding and regrowing, not just forests, but also grasslands and coastlands and peatlands, we can take up to 37% of the carbon we produce every year out of the atmosphere.
But we're talking about gigatons that keep on getting dumped and dumped into this open sewer, which is our atmosphere.
Oh yeah, and so that's why there's no one solution. So the way I think about it is, if the atmosphere were a swimming pool, and it always has a natural level of heat-trapping gases in the swimming pool that keep us just the right temperature for life.
Yeah.
And around about the beginning of the Industrial Revolution, we stuck a giant hose into the swimming pool, and we've been turning it up every single year.
Yeah.
Except during the pandemic, we turned it down 7%, and then we turned it right back up again. Another 1% this year. So, first of all, we have to turn down the hose and turn it off. Efficiency, clean energy.
Yeah.
But second of all, the swimming pool has a drain. We need to make that drain bigger through nature-based solutions. But there's one more thing we have to do. The level of water in the pool is already higher than any time in the history of humans on this planet. We have to learn how to swim. That's adaptation.
There are people from low-lying areas like the Maldives and Tuvalu and some of these countries that
can't.
Could go away. Like those countries could just be deleted off the map. And that's real. That's not something that may happen in 30 years. That's something that could happen at the end of this decade.
It could, and that's why these meetings are so important. To look into the face of someone who the choices your country is making could doom. That is the only way that we're going to get to be able to work together, recognizing that each other is human. We all have our homes, we all have people we love and places we love, and some of those will disappear if we do not fix climate change.
Not just the land, but the culture as well.
Mm-hmm. It's already happening. In the Arctic, changes in the timing of sea ice, changes in migration patterns are already affecting the traditional lives and ways of indigenous people in the Arctic.
You can't go hunting where you used to go hunting.
No, and you can't even save what you used to hunt. You can't fit a whole walrus in a freezer. And so they used to dig these caves, freezer caves in the permafrost and put the catch in there. But now the permafrost is thawing. And so all of the food that you depended on through the summer is going bad.
And permafrost is full of methane.
Oh yes, it is.
Yeah.
It just goes round and round and round. So basically, the more we do, the sooner we do it, the better off we'll all be.
And so is there one thing that you've seen here that you didn't expect to see that you're surprised by?
I knew that I was going to see the world here, and I do.
Yeah.
But I have been encouraged by the conversations, and it's not just the negotiators. Most people here are not negotiators. They're here to have conversations about how to tackle this issue with freezing national debt payments if that country had a climate disaster, or restructuring their national debt so for a lower interest rate if they'll spend the money they save on investing in protecting nature and biodiversity. So seeing all of these negotiations happening out of the negotiating rooms is incredibly encouraging, because we really are starting to change the world. We just need more. And how are we going to get that? If every single one of us, no matter who we are, no matter where we live, uses our voice to advocate for change.
And there's a lot of voices here.
There
Katharine
are.
Hayhoe.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for everything you do.
COP27, our planet, our future.